Hello there and welcome to Theories Before Sleep. I'm so glad you're here. Maybe it's been a long day filled with feelings you couldn't name. Perhaps your heart feels heavy, or your mind keeps replaying moments when emotions rose like unexpected tides. Or maybe you're simply curious about what moves inside us, seeking something peaceful to carry you into sleep. Tonight's journey is for you. You don't need to do anything but rest. Let your breath slow, your thoughts soften, and your body grow light. We're going to explore 100 theories about human emotions, not in a rush, but slowly, gently. From ancient ideas about the heart's wisdom to modern theories of how feelings shape our reality, each theory a quiet doorway into understanding what makes us human. Some will feel familiar, like old friends, others strange, like distant stars. All are presented to help you drift peacefully towards sleep. If these explorations help you unwind, consider liking and subscribing. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Now let's begin. The first theory is waiting, patient and quiet. Emotions emerge from the body's internal landscape, not the mind alone. This theory, proposed by William James over a century ago, suggests we don't cry because we're sad. We're sad because we cry. The physical sensations come first. The racing heart, the tight throat, the trembling hands. Our brain interprets these bodily changes and labels them as emotions. A pounding heart during a presentation becomes anxiety. The same sensation while watching someone you love becomes excitement. The body speaks first in a language of sensation, and consciousness translates these whispers into feelings we can name. This means emotions aren't abstract mental states, but embodied experiences, rooted in flesh and blood and breath. Your sadness lives in your shoulders, your joy pulses through your chest. Every feeling has a home somewhere in the physical self, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be felt. Emotions evolved to solve survival problems our ancestors faced millions of years ago. Fear kept us alive when predators lurked in shadows. Disgust prevented us from eating poisoned food. Anger prepared us to fight for resources. Love bonded us to allies and mates. This evolutionary perspective suggests every emotion, even painful ones, served a purpose in the ancient past. Anxiety wasn't a disorder, but a warning system. Sadness wasn't weakness, but a signal to conserve energy and seek support. Even shame had a function, keeping us connected to our social groups by making us care about others' opinions. These emotional programs still run in our modern minds, sometimes misfiring in a world vastly different from the one that shaped them. We feel ancient fears in modern contexts, our bodies responding to emails as if they were predators, our hearts racing at social rejection as if it meant death. The emotions remain, echoes of a distant past trying to protect us in ways we no longer need. There exists a small set of basic emotions universal to all humans across all cultures. Psychologist Paul Ekman identified 6: happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. These emotions appear on faces the same way whether someone lives in New York or a remote village in Papua New Guinea. A smile means joy everywhere. A furrowed brow signals anger in every language. This universality suggests these emotions are hardwired into human nature, not learned from culture, but inherited from our shared biology. They're the primary colours from which all other feelings blend. Jealousy might mix anger with fear. Nostalgia might blend happiness with sadness. Every complex emotion we experience could be a combination of these fundamental 6, the way every colour emerges from mixing red, blue, and yellow. The theory offers a map of the heart's terrain, showing us the basic elements that combine into infinite emotional experiences, simple building blocks creating vast complexity, the way atoms arrange into everything that exists. Emotions don't exist as distinct categories, but as points on a continuous spectrum of feeling. Psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett proposes that what we call emotions are constructed by our brains from two basic ingredients: how pleasant or unpleasant we feel, and how activated or calm our body is. There's no specific circuit for sadness or joy, just varying levels of these two dimensions. Your brain takes these raw feelings and constructs an emotion based on context, past experience, and learned concepts. The same internal state might become anger in one situation, excitement in another. This theory suggests emotions are more flexible and context-dependent than we imagine. They're not hardwired programs, but improvised interpretations. Our brains making sense of bodily sensations by creating emotional experiences that fit the moment. We learn what emotions are supposed to feel like, and then we feel them. The heart doesn't know happiness from excitement. Only the mind decides which label fits. Positive emotions broaden our thinking, while negative emotions narrow it. Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory suggests that joy, interest, and contentment expand our awareness and encourage exploration. When happy, we notice more, think more creatively, make new connections. Negative emotions like fear or anger do the opposite, focusing our attention on immediate threats and limiting our options to fight or flee. This makes evolutionary sense. When danger looms, you don't want to ponder possibilities, you want to act. But when safe and content, your mind can wander. Play, imagine, build for the future. Positive emotions don't just feel good. They literally change how our brains process information, opening doors that negative emotions close. Over time, these moments of broadened thinking accumulate into lasting resources: new skills, relationships, knowledge, resilience. Joy isn't just pleasure, it's an investment in future well-being, a way of building the self through expanded awareness. Each moment of genuine happiness makes us more capable, more connected, more whole. Emotions require both physiological arousal and cognitive interpretation to exist. Stanley Schachter's two-factor theory suggests that feeling an emotion involves two steps. First, your body becomes aroused, heart racing, palms sweating. Second, your mind searches for an explanation for this arousal. If you're aroused while watching a horror movie, you label it fear. If aroused while on a first date, you might label it attraction. The same physical state becomes different emotions depending on the story your mind tells about why you're aroused. This explains why emotions can be ambiguous, why we sometimes misidentify what we're feeling. A racing heart could be anxiety or excitement. The body can't tell the difference. Only the mind's interpretation creates the specific emotion. This theory suggests emotions are less automatic than we think, more dependent on how we frame and understand our physical sensations. We're constantly interpreting ourselves, narrating our internal states, turning raw arousal into named feelings. The body provides the energy, the mind provides the meaning. Emotions are fundamentally social, designed to communicate and coordinate with others. When you smile, others feel invited to approach. When you cry, others feel moved to comfort. When you express anger, others know to back away or negotiate. These emotional displays aren't just internal experiences leaking outward. They're signals evolved specifically for social communication. Infants cry to summon caregivers. Adults blush to show remorse. Every emotion has an outward expression that affects those around us, creating a shared emotional environment. This social function might be emotion's primary purpose, not to help individuals make decisions, but to help groups coordinate and cooperate. Your sadness tells others you need support. Your joy tells them you're safe to be around. Your fear warns them of danger. Emotions are the language that connects us before words, the way we share our internal worlds and influence each other's states. We're constantly broadcasting our feelings and receiving others, creating an invisible network of emotional communication that shapes every interaction, every relationship, every moment spent in the presence of another human being. We experience emotions in layers, with some feelings hidden beneath others. Psychotherapists often speak of primary and secondary emotions, the immediate feeling and the reaction to that feeling. You might feel hurt, then immediately feel angry about feeling hurt. The anger is easier, more protective, so it rises to the surface while the hurt stays hidden underneath. Or you might feel afraid, then feel ashamed of your fear and express only the shame. These layered emotions can become complex tangles, making it hard to know what you're actually feeling. The surface emotion might be the opposite of the deeper one. Someone laughing might be hiding sadness. Someone raging might be concealing fear. Understanding emotions means learning to look beneath the obvious, to ask what feeling hides under the feeling you're expressing. The heart keeps secrets even from itself, burying vulnerable emotions under more acceptable ones, creating emotional disguises that protect us but also confuse us. To know yourself is to excavate these layers, to find the true feeling beneath the defensive ones, the tender truth under the armored surface. Emotions can be suppressed but never truly eliminated, and suppression has costs. When you push down feelings, they don't disappear. They go underground, influencing you in ways you can't see. Suppressed anger might become passive aggression. Suppressed sadness might become numbness. Suppressed fear might become chronic anxiety. The emotional energy doesn't vanish. It transforms, finding other outlets, other expressions. Studies show that people who habitually suppress emotions experience more stress, worse health, and less satisfying relationships. The effort of suppression itself is exhausting, requiring constant vigilance to keep feelings locked away. And what's suppressed often erupts eventually, sometimes in disproportionate ways, a small trigger releasing years of accumulated feeling. This theory suggests that emotional health requires feeling our feelings, not fighting them, allowing emotions to flow through us rather than damming them up, acknowledging what we feel even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's inconvenient. The alternative is a kind of emotional pressure that builds silently, invisibly, until something finally gives way. Emotions exist on a spectrum from conscious to unconscious, and much of our emotional life happens below awareness. You might feel vaguely uneasy without knowing why. You might be drawn to someone without understanding the attraction. You might make decisions based on feelings you can't articulate. These unconscious emotions influence us constantly, shaping our choices, our perceptions, our reactions. Freud believed most emotional life was unconscious, hidden from the self by psychological defenses. Modern neuroscience confirms that emotional processing happens largely outside conscious awareness, in brain regions that work faster than conscious thought. By the time you know you're afraid, your body has already begun responding to the threat. By the time you recognize attraction, your pupils have already dilated. We're moved by feelings we don't fully perceive, guided by emotional currents flowing beneath the surface of consciousness. To understand yourself is to become aware of these hidden feelings, to bring unconscious emotions into the light where they can be examined, understood, integrated into the self you know. From cosmic scales, we turn inward to how emotions shape the architecture of memory itself. Emotional experiences are remembered more vividly than neutral ones. A birthday party stays with you longer than a regular Tuesday. A moment of heartbreak remains vivid while countless ordinary conversations fade. This happens because emotions trigger the release of stress hormones that enhance memory consolidation. When something makes you feel strongly, your brain tags it as important and stores it more carefully. The amygdala, which processes emotions, communicates with the hippocampus, which forms memories, creating what neuroscientists call emotional memory. These memories aren't just stronger, they're more detailed, more sensory, more complete. You remember not just what happened, but how it felt, what you saw, what you heard. The emotional intensity acts like a highlighter, marking certain experiences as significant. This is why trauma can be so persistent. The emotional charge ensures the memory stays vivid, accessible, intrusive. but it also explains why the best moments of life remain bright in memory, while years of routine blur together. Emotions write our autobiography, deciding which moments matter enough to preserve. Emotions can be contagious, spreading from person to person like invisible ripples. When someone smiles at you, you're likely to smile back without thinking. When someone near you seems anxious, you might start feeling anxious too. This emotional contagion happens automatically, through mirror neurons that fire both when we experience an emotion and when we observe someone else experiencing it. We literally feel what others feel, our nervous systems resonating with theirs. This explains why moods can spread through groups, why one person's anxiety can make everyone tense, why laughter is genuinely contagious. We're not isolated emotional islands, but interconnected systems, constantly influencing and being influenced by the emotional states around us. Spend time with joyful people, and you'll likely feel more joyful. Spend time with depressed people, and you might feel your own mood darken. This isn't weakness or suggestibility. It's how humans are built, designed to sync with each other emotionally, creating shared feeling states that bind groups together and coordinate collective action. Emotions follow predictable patterns over time, rising and falling in characteristic ways. Anger typically peaks quickly and fades relatively fast. Sadness builds more slowly and lingers longer. Joy can be intense but often brief, while contentment is milder but more sustained. These temporal patterns are part of each emotion signature, as distinctive as their associated facial expressions or bodily sensations. Understanding these patterns can help us navigate our emotional lives more skillfully. When angry, knowing the feeling will peak soon might help us avoid acting on it at its height. When sad, knowing the feeling will eventually ease might provide comfort during the darkest moments. Each emotion has its own rhythm, its own life cycle. They rise like waves, crest, and eventually return to baseline. Nothing lasts forever, not joy, not suffering, not any feeling state. This impermanence is both the tragedy and the hope of emotional life. The pain will pass, but so will the pleasure. We exist in constant flux, emotions flowing through us like weather, never static, always changing, each feeling giving way to the next. Emotions can be regulated through various cognitive and behavioral strategies. You can reframe a situation to change how you feel about it. You can redirect your attention away from emotional triggers. You can modify the situation itself to prevent unwanted emotions. You can suppress emotional expression even while feeling the emotion internally. These regulatory strategies vary in effectiveness and cost. Reappraisal, changing how you think about something, tends to be healthier than suppression, which requires more effort and has more negative side effects. Some people regulate emotions easily, automatically. Others struggle, overwhelmed by feelings they can't control or modulate. This capacity for emotional regulation develops in childhood and can be strengthened throughout life. It's not about eliminating emotions, but about managing their intensity and duration, preventing them from overwhelming you or causing harm. The goal isn't to never feel anger, but to keep anger from controlling you. Not to never feel sadness, but to prevent sadness from becoming despair. Emotional regulation is the skill of living with feelings skillfully, neither suppressing them nor being ruled by them. Emotions have valence. They feel good or bad, and arousal. They're activating or calming. This two-dimensional model suggests all emotions can be plotted on a grid, with valence on one axis and arousal on the other. Excitement is positive and high arousal. Contentment is positive and low arousal. Anger is negative and high arousal. Sadness is negative and low arousal. This framework helps explain why some emotions feel similar despite being different. Anxiety and excitement both involve high arousal, differing mainly in valence. Relaxation and depression both involve low arousal, differing in whether they feel good or bad. Understanding these dimensions can help us shift emotions more effectively. Sometimes changing arousal is easier than changing valence. If you're anxious, maybe you can't become happy immediately, but you can become calm, moving from high to low arousal while staying in negative valence temporarily. The path from anxiety to peace might go through sadness. The path from boredom to joy might go through excitement. Emotions aren't random points, but locations in a structured space, and understanding that structure helps us navigate it. Emotions serve as information, telling us about our relationship to the world. Fear says, there's danger here. Anger says, a boundary has been violated. Sadness says, something valuable has been lost. Joy says, this is good, do more of it. Rather than being irrational disturbances to clear thinking, emotions are a form of thinking themselves, rapid, intuitive assessments of situations. They provide information that conscious reasoning might miss or take too long to process. A sudden feeling of unease in a dark parking lot might save your life, even if you can't articulate why you feel uneasy. Emotions evolved to be fast, to move us before we have time to deliberate. This doesn't mean they're always right. Emotions can be based on outdated information or trigger in inappropriate contexts, but it does mean they deserve attention, not dismissal. When you feel something strongly, it's worth asking what information that feeling might contain. What is this emotion telling me? What does it want me to know? Treating emotions as data rather than noise transforms our relationship with them, turning feelings from problems to solve into messages to decode. Emotions are shaped by culture, not just biology. While basic emotions might be universal, how we experience, express, and interpret emotions varies dramatically across cultures. Some cultures encourage emotional expression, others value restraint. Some cultures have words for emotions that don't exist in other languages. The German Schadenfreude, the Portuguese Saudade, the Japanese Amai. These aren't just vocabulary differences, but different ways of carving up emotional experience, different categories for organizing feelings. Growing up in a particular culture teaches you which emotions are acceptable, which are shameful, how intensely to feel them, when to express them, how to express them. A culture that values honor might cultivate shame more than a culture that values individual autonomy. A culture that emphasizes harmony might discourage anger more than a culture that values assertiveness. Your emotional life is shaped by invisible cultural rules you absorbed before you could speak, rules that feel natural but are actually learned. Understanding this cultural dimension reveals how much of what seems universal about emotions is actually local, specific, constructed by the particular world you inhabit. Emotions can be mixed, with multiple feelings occurring simultaneously. You can feel happy and sad at the same time, graduating from school, moving away from home. You can feel angry and afraid together, confronting someone who has power over you. You can feel love and resentment toward the same person. These mixed emotions aren't confusion but complexity, the natural result of situations that trigger multiple appraisals at once. Something can be both good and bad, both desired and feared, both joyful and painful. Life rarely offers pure emotional states. More often, it offers complicated blends that resist simple categorization. This emotional ambivalence is part of being human, part of responding to a world that's rarely simple. The heart is large enough to hold contradictions, to feel opposing things at once without resolving them into a single clear feeling. Sometimes the most honest answer to how do you feel is I don't know. Several things at once, some of them opposites. That confusion isn't a problem to solve but a truth to accept, an acknowledgement of emotional complexity that matches the complexity of life itself. Emotions have optimal levels. Too much or too little of any emotion can be problematic. Too much fear becomes anxiety disorder. Too little fear becomes recklessness. Too much happiness can lead to poor decision-making and risky behavior. Too little happiness is depression. The goal isn't to maximize positive emotions and eliminate negative ones, but to experience emotions in appropriate intensities for appropriate durations in response to appropriate situations. This is what psychologists call emotional balance or emotional health, not the absence of negative emotions, but their presence in proportionate functional ways. Some situations should make you angry, that's healthy anger. Some losses should make you sad, that's healthy sadness. The problem isn't feeling these emotions, but feeling them too intensely, too frequently, or in situations that don't warrant them. Emotional health is like physical health, not the absence of all symptoms, but the presence of appropriate responses to circumstances, with the flexibility to return to baseline when circumstances change. The heart, like the body, seeks homeostasis, a dynamic balance that allows for variation while maintaining overall stability. Emotions prepare the body for action, each one associated with specific physiological changes. Fear increases heart rate and blood pressure, preparing you to run. Anger does the same but directs energy toward confrontation rather than escape. Disgust slows heart rate and makes you want to expel or avoid something. Sadness decreases energy and motivation, encouraging withdrawal and conservation. These bodily changes aren't side effects of emotion, they're part of what emotion is, the body configuring itself for different challenges. When you feel anxious before a presentation, your body is preparing to perform, increasing arousal and alertness. When you feel sad after a loss, your body is conserving resources during a time when action won't help. Understanding these action tendencies helps make sense of why emotions feel the way they do. The racing heart isn't random, it's your body preparing to act. The heavy limbs aren't weakness, they're your body telling you to rest. Emotions are embodied readiness, the organism preparing to engage with the world in emotion-specific ways, each feeling a different mode of being ready. Emotions can become disordered, occurring too intensely, too frequently, or in inappropriate contexts. Anxiety disorders involve fear responses to situations that aren't actually dangerous. Depression involves prolonged sadness, disconnected from specific losses. These aren't just extreme versions of normal emotions, but dysfunctions in emotional systems, like physical illnesses of the emotional brain. The line between normal and disordered emotion isn't always clear. It's more a continuum than a boundary. But when emotions become so intense or persistent that they interfere with daily functioning, when they cause significant distress, when they seem disconnected from circumstances, they've crossed into disorder. Understanding this helps reduce stigma. Emotional disorders aren't character flaws or weakness, but malfunctions in complex systems, no more shameful than diabetes or heart disease. They're also treatable through therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, various interventions that can help restore more functional emotional patterns. The brain that creates emotions is the same brain that can learn to regulate them differently, to respond to the world in healthier ways, to recover function that's been lost or never fully developed. Another theory explores a related mystery: how emotions shape not just individual experience but collective reality itself. Emotions influence moral judgment in ways we don't consciously recognize. Disgust makes us judge actions as more morally wrong. Sadness makes us more empathetic. Anger makes us more punitive. These emotional influences happen automatically, outside awareness, shaping our sense of right and wrong without our knowing it. Someone who feels disgusted will make harsher moral judgments than someone who feels neutral, even about the same action. This suggests morality isn't purely rational but deeply emotional, our gut feelings guiding our ethical intuitions. We feel that something is wrong before we can articulate why, and then we construct rational justifications for feelings that came first. This doesn't mean morality is arbitrary, but it does mean it's more emotional than we like to admit. Our sense of justice, fairness, right, and wrong all are coloured by emotional states that shift and change. The same person might judge the same action differently depending on their mood. Understanding this emotional foundation of morality reveals how much of ethics is about managing feelings, cultivating the right emotional responses to situations rather than just applying logical rules. Emotions can be anticipated, and the anticipation itself becomes an emotion. You feel anxious before a scary movie, excited before a vacation, dreading before a difficult conversation. These anticipatory emotions are distinct from the emotions you'll feel during the actual event. Sometimes the anticipation is worse than the reality, the dread more painful than the thing dreaded. Sometimes the anticipation is better, the excitement more intense than the actual experience. This temporal dimension of emotion means we're rarely just experiencing the present moment. We're also feeling our predictions about the future, our expectations colouring current experience. Anticipatory anxiety can ruin days before an event that might turn out fine. Anticipatory joy can make the waiting as pleasurable as the arrival. We live partly in imagined futures, feeling emotions about things that haven't happened yet, things that might never happen. This capacity for emotional time travel is uniquely human, allowing us to prepare for future challenges, but also to suffer about possibilities that may never materialize. The heart lives in multiple tenses at once, feeling the past as memory, the present as sensation, the future as anticipation. Emotions are embodied metaphors, our language revealing how we physically experience feelings. We say we're down when sad, up when happy. We feel warm toward people we like, cold toward those we don't. We're moved by beauty, frozen by fear, burning with anger. These aren't just figures of speech, but reflections of actual bodily experiences. Sadness does involve a sense of downward heaviness. Happiness does feel lighter, upward. Affection does create sensations of warmth. These physical metaphors are consistent across cultures, suggesting deep connections between body and emotion. We understand emotions through the body's experience of them, and we communicate emotions through physical metaphors that others understand because they felt the same bodily sensations. This embodied cognition theory suggests thinking and feeling aren't separate from physical experience, but deeply rooted in it. The body isn't just a vessel for the mind, it's part of how the mind works, how we make sense of abstract concepts like emotion by grounding them in concrete physical sensations we all share. To understand emotion is to understand the body's wisdom, the way flesh and feeling interweave. Emotions have different timescales, from split-second reactions to mood states lasting days. A startle response lasts less than a second. An episode of anger might last minutes. A mood of irritability might last hours or days. Depression can persist for months or years. These different temporal scales represent different emotional phenomena, not just different durations of the same thing. A mood isn't just a long-lasting emotion. It's a background state that colours all experiences, making you more likely to feel certain emotions. When in a good mood, small pleasures feel more intense. When in a bad mood, small annoyances feel more frustrating. Moods are like emotional weather, setting the tone for whatever specific emotions arise. Understanding these temporal distinctions helps us respond appropriately. A momentary flash of anger might just need to be felt and released, while a persistent mood of irritability might need deeper investigation. What maintains this state? What would shift it? The heart operates on multiple timescales simultaneously, responding to immediate events while also maintaining longer-term emotional climates that shape how those events are experienced. Emotions can be transformed through reappraisal, changing how you think about a situation to change how you feel about it. A job rejection can be devastating or an opportunity to find something better. A mistake can be shameful or a learning experience. The facts remain the same, but the meaning changes, and with it, the emotional response. This cognitive strategy is one of the most effective ways to regulate emotions, more sustainable than suppression, more flexible than situation modification. It doesn't deny what happened, but reframes it, finding different aspects to focus on, different interpretations to adopt. Someone skilled at reappraisal can find silver linings, maintain perspective, shift from catastrophic thinking to more balanced views. This isn't toxic positivity. Not every situation has a bright side. But many situations are ambiguous enough to support multiple interpretations, and choosing interpretations that lead to less suffering is a skill worth developing. The same event filtered through different thoughts creates different feelings. Learning to adjust that filter, to question automatic interpretations, to consider alternatives, this is emotional wisdom, the art of managing feelings by managing the thoughts that generate them. Emotions have social functions beyond individual experience, helping coordinate group behavior and maintain social bonds. Collective emotions like shared joy at celebrations or shared grief at funerals bind communities together. Emotional synchrony, when a group feels the same thing at the same time, creates a sense of unity and belonging. This is why rituals often involve emotional arousal. The shared feeling creates social cohesion. Sports fans feeling collective excitement, protesters feeling collective anger, mourners feeling collective sadness. These synchronized emotional states strengthen group identity and commitment. On a smaller scale, emotional attunement between individuals builds intimacy. When someone mirrors your emotions, you feel understood. When they respond to your distress with comfort, you feel cared for. These social emotional dynamics are the glue of relationships, the way we signal to each other that we're connected, that we're part of the same tribe, that we matter to each other. Emotions aren't just internal states, but social signals and social bonds, the medium through which human connection flows, the language of belonging that predates words and outlasts them. Emotions can be regulated not just by individuals, but by relationships and social systems. A parent soothes a child's distress. A friend helps you reframe a problem. A therapist helps you process difficult feelings. These external sources of emotional regulation are called co-regulation, and they're essential throughout life, not just in childhood. We regulate each other's emotions constantly, often without realizing it. A calm presence can settle someone's anxiety. An enthusiastic response can amplify someone's joy. We're not emotionally self-sufficient. We depend on others to help us manage feelings that would overwhelm us alone. This is why isolation is so difficult. It removes access to co-regulation, leaving us to manage all emotions independently. It's also why relationships matter so much for mental health. Good relationships provide effective co-regulation, helping us stay emotionally balanced. Poor relationships provide dysregulation, making emotions more intense and harder to manage. The quality of your emotional life depends partly on the quality of your relationships, on whether the people around you help you regulate or push you further into dysregulation. We are emotionally interdependent creatures, our feelings shaped by the social context we inhabit. Emotions involve appraisal, automatic evaluations of situations along dimensions like goal relevance, coping potential, and norm compatibility. When something happens, your brain rapidly assesses, does this matter to my goals? Can I cope with it? Is it fair? These appraisals happen so fast they feel instantaneous, generating emotions before conscious thought catches up. Different appraisal patterns create different emotions. If something blocks your goals and you feel you can fight it, you feel anger. If something threatens you and you feel you can't cope, you feel fear. If you lose something valuable and can't recover it, you feel sadness. This appraisal theory explains why the same event can trigger different emotions in different people. They're appraising it differently based on their goals, their coping resources, their values. It also suggests that changing emotions might require changing appraisals. If you can reappraise a threat as a challenge, fear might shift to excitement. If you can reappraise an obstacle as temporary, anger might shift to determination. The emotions we feel reflect not just what happens, but how we evaluate what happens, the meaning we make of events in relation to what matters to us. Emotions have evolutionary layers, with newer emotional capacities built on top of older ones. Basic emotions like fear and anger are ancient, shared with many animals, mediated by primitive brain structures. More complex emotions like shame and pride are newer, requiring cognitive capacities that emerged later in evolution, mediated by more recently evolved brain regions. This means we have multiple emotional systems operating simultaneously, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict. Your ancient fear system might scream danger, while your newer cognitive systems try to reason that you're safe. Your primitive rage might want to lash out, while your social emotions feel shame at the impulse. We're not unified emotional beings, but collections of emotional systems, each with its own logic, its own triggers, its own purposes. Understanding this layered architecture helps explain internal conflicts, the sense of being pulled in different directions by different parts of yourself. You contain multitudes, ancient and modern, primitive and sophisticated, animal and human, all generating feelings that sometimes align and sometimes clash, creating the complex inner experience we call emotional life. Emotions can be differentiated, experienced with clarity and specificity, or undifferentiated, experienced as vague, confused, overwhelming. Someone with high emotional granularity can distinguish subtle differences between similar emotions, frustrated versus annoyed versus irritated. Someone with low granularity might just feel bad without being able to specify further. This differentiation matters because it affects regulation. You can't effectively regulate emotions you can't identify. If you only know you feel bad, you don't know what would help. If you know you feel lonely specifically, you know you need connection. Emotional granularity can be developed through practice, learning to name feelings more precisely, to notice subtle distinctions, to expand your emotional vocabulary. The more words you have for feelings, the more feelings you can recognize and understand. This doesn't mean intellectualizing emotion, but becoming more aware of your internal landscape, able to map its terrain with increasing precision. The heart's geography is complex, and learning its features, learning the difference between sadness and disappointment, between anxiety and excitement, between contentment and complacency, allows for more skillful navigation through emotional territory. From the personal terrain of emotional awareness, we move toward the strange borderlands where feelings and physical health interweave. Emotions affect physical health in profound ways, with chronic negative emotions increasing risk for various diseases. Persistent anger raises blood pressure. Chronic stress suppresses immune function. Depression increases inflammation. The mind-body connection isn't metaphorical but literal, with emotional states triggering biological changes that accumulate over time into health outcomes. This doesn't mean emotions cause all illness, but they're a significant factor, part of the complex web of influences on health. Positive emotions have protective effects. Joy, gratitude, and love are associated with better health outcomes, longer life, faster recovery from illness. The mechanisms are still being discovered, but they likely involve stress hormones, immune function, inflammation, and behavioral pathways. Happy people tend to take better care of themselves. Understanding this connection reveals how emotional health and physical health are inseparable, two aspects of the same embodied existence. Taking care of your emotional life isn't just about feeling better psychologically, it's about being healthier physically, the two dimensions of well-being woven together in ways we're only beginning to understand. Emotions can be alexithymic, difficult or impossible to identify and describe. People with alexithymia know they feel something, but can't name it, can't articulate it, can't distinguish one feeling from another. They might experience emotions primarily as physical sensations, tightness in the chest, churning in the stomach, without the accompanying mental experience of feeling sad or anxious. This isn't a choice or a personality trait, but a difference in how emotional information is processed, possibly related to reduced communication between brain regions that generate emotions and regions that create conscious awareness of them. For people with alexithymia, the emotional world is foggy, confusing, difficult to navigate. They might seem emotionally distant, not because they don't feel, but because they can't access or communicate their feelings. This condition highlights how much we take for granted the ability to know what we feel, to name it, to share it with others. That capacity isn't universal. It's a specific skill, a specific neural function that can be impaired or absent, leaving someone emotionally blind in a world that assumes everyone can see their own feelings clearly. Emotions involve both automatic and controlled processes, some aspects happening without conscious input, others requiring deliberate effort. The initial emotional response is automatic. You see a snake and feel fear before you can think about it. But what you do with that fear involves controlled processes. You can decide whether to run, to investigate, to breathe deeply, and calm yourself. This dual process model explains why emotions feel both involuntary and manageable. You can't choose not to feel fear when you see the snake, but you can choose how to respond to that fear. The automatic processes are fast, efficient, shaped by evolution and past experience. The controlled processes are slower, more flexible, allowing for regulation and modulation. Emotional intelligence involves developing the controlled processes without suppressing the automatic ones, staying connected to your feelings while also managing them skillfully. It's not about overriding emotion with reason, but about creating a partnership between automatic emotional responses and deliberate emotional management, letting both systems contribute their wisdom to how you navigate the world. Emotions can be aesthetic, triggered by beauty, art, music, nature, rather than by goal-relevant events. These aesthetic emotions, awe, wonder, being moved, feel different from pragmatic emotions like fear or anger. They're less about survival or goal pursuit and more about meaning, transcendence, connection to something larger. When you stand before a stunning landscape or hear a piece of music that makes you cry, the emotion isn't warning you of danger or signaling loss. It's responding to beauty, to excellence, to the sublime. These emotions might seem less important than survival emotions, but they're deeply human. Part of what makes life meaningful rather than just survivable. They connect us to culture, to nature, to each other through shared appreciation of beauty. They expand our sense of what's possible, what matters, what's worth caring about. Aesthetic emotions are the heart's response to the world's beauty, a kind of emotional gratitude for existence itself, for the fact that reality contains not just threats and opportunities, but also wonder, majesty, grace. They remind us that emotions aren't just about problems to solve, but about experiences to savor. Emotions can be counterfactual, arising from comparisons between what happened and what might have been. Regret comes from imagining better outcomes if you'd chosen differently. Relief comes from imagining worse outcomes that didn't occur. These emotions require sophisticated cognitive abilities, the capacity to imagine alternative realities, to compare actual outcomes with possible ones. A missed opportunity only feels regrettable if you can imagine having taken it. A narrow escape only feels relieving if you can imagine what would have happened if you hadn't escaped. These counterfactual emotions are uniquely human, depending on abilities that emerge relatively late in development and that other animals likely don't possess. They allow us to learn from the past by imagining how different choices would have led to different outcomes, but they also create suffering, regret over unchangeable past, anxiety over possible futures. We feel emotions about things that didn't happen, that might never happen, that exist only in imagination. This is both gift and curse, the ability to learn from alternatives but also the burden of living partly in worlds that don't exist, feeling real emotions about imaginary events. Emotions involve memory, with current feelings influenced by past experiences of similar situations. Your fear of dogs might stem from being bitten as a child. Your joy at the ocean might connect to happy childhood vacations. These emotional memories aren't always conscious. You might feel anxious in certain situations without remembering why, without knowing what past experience taught you to feel this way. The emotional brain learns from experience, forming associations between situations and feelings that then guide future responses. This is adaptive. If something was dangerous once, it's probably dangerous again. But it can also be maladaptive when past learning doesn't fit present reality, when you react to current situations as if they were past ones. Someone with trauma might feel terror in situations that resemble the trauma, but aren't actually dangerous. Emotional memory is powerful, persistent, resistant to change. You can know consciously that something is safe while still feeling fear because the emotional memory says otherwise. Healing often involves updating these emotional memories, teaching the emotional brain that the past doesn't predict the present, that old associations no longer apply. Emotions can be empathic, feeling what others feel through a process of emotional resonance. When you see someone in pain, you might feel pain yourself. When you see someone joyful, you might feel joy. This empathic emotion is distinct from your own emotional responses to situations. It's specifically about sharing another person's feeling state. The mirror neurons in the brain fire both when you experience an emotion and when you observe someone else experiencing it, creating a neural basis for empathy. This capacity for shared feeling is fundamental to human social life, allowing us to understand others from the inside, to care about their well-being, to coordinate and cooperate. Without empathy, we'd be emotionally isolated, unable to truly connect with others' experiences. But empathy can also be overwhelming, especially for highly sensitive people who absorb others' emotions intensely. Learning to feel with others while maintaining boundaries, to empathize without losing yourself in others' feelings, is a delicate balance. The heart can hold both your feelings and awareness of others' feelings, resonating with their experience while remaining anchored in your own. Emotions can be moral, specifically about right and wrong, justice and injustice. Guilt arises when you violate your own moral standards. Shame arises when you fail to live up to social standards. Moral outrage arises when you witness injustice. These moral emotions are distinct from other emotions in being specifically about ethical dimensions of experience. They motivate moral behavior. Guilt motivates making amends. Shame motivates hiding or changing. Outrage motivates confronting wrongdoing. These emotions are how conscience feels, the emotional enforcement of moral rules. Without guilt, we'd harm others without remorse. Without shame, we'd violate social norms without caring. Without outrage, we'd tolerate injustice passively. Moral emotions are the glue that holds society together, making us care about right and wrong, not just intellectually, but viscerally, in our guts, in our hearts. They make morality felt rather than just thought, transforming abstract principles into lived experience. The heart has its own sense of justice, its own moral compass, expressed through feelings that guide us toward being the people we want to be. Emotions can be existential, arising from our awareness of fundamental aspects of human existence like death, freedom, meaninglessness, and isolation. Anxiety about death, despair about meaninglessness, anguish about freedom and responsibility. These existential emotions are specifically human, requiring the cognitive capacity to reflect on existence itself. Other animals fear death when it's imminent, but humans fear death abstractly, knowing it will come eventually, living with that knowledge constantly. This existential awareness generates unique emotional experiences. The anxiety of knowing you'll die, the burden of freedom to choose who you'll be, the loneliness of being fundamentally separate from others, the dread of a universe that might be meaningless. These emotions can be overwhelming, but existential philosophers suggest they can also be transformative. pushing us to live authentically, to create meaning, to connect deeply with others. The awareness that generates existential anxiety is the same awareness that allows for love, meaning, purpose, beauty. To be human is to feel these existential emotions, to live with awareness of our condition, to find ways to be despite the fundamental uncertainties and limitations of existence. Emotions can be nostalgic, a bittersweet longing for the past that mixes happiness and sadness. Nostalgia isn't just remembering. It's a specific emotional response to memory, a yearning for times and places you can't return to. It's triggered by reminders of the past, old songs, photographs, smells, places. The emotion is complex, simultaneously warm and melancholic, comforting and painful. Research suggests nostalgia serves important functions. It increases social connectedness by reminding us of relationships. It boosts self-continuity by connecting present self to past self. It provides meaning by highlighting valued experiences. Nostalgia is the heart's way of maintaining connection to who you've been, where you've come from, what you've loved. It's a bridge between past and present, allowing past experiences to remain alive in current feeling. The sadness in nostalgia comes from knowing you can't return, that time only moves forward, that those moments are gone. The happiness comes from knowing they happened at all, that you were there, that you lived those experiences. Nostalgia is memory felt rather than just recalled, the past alive in present emotion, bittersweet and beautiful. If your mind is starting to wander, that's perfectly fine. These theories aren't meant to be memorized, only experienced, like watching clouds drift across the sky. Emotions can be transcendent, taking you beyond ordinary experience into states of awe, wonder, or spiritual feeling. These self-transcendent emotions involve a sense of connection to something larger than yourself, nature, humanity, the universe, the divine. They're characterized by a diminishment of self-focus and an expansion of perspective, feeling small in a good way, part of something vast and meaningful. Awe, in particular, has been studied for its unique effects. It makes people more generous, more patient, more humble. It shifts attention from personal concerns to broader contexts, from immediate problems to larger patterns. These emotions might be evolutionary adaptations that helped humans cooperate in large groups by creating feelings of connection to collectives larger than kin. Or they might be side effects of cognitive capacities that allow us to think about scale, infinity, eternity. Either way, they're among the most valued emotional experiences, moments when the boundaries of self seem to dissolve and you feel connected to everything. The heart, in these moments, expands beyond its usual limits, touching something that feels infinite, eternal, sacred. Emotions can be anticipatory in ways that shape behavior before events occur. Anticipated regret can prevent risky decisions. You don't do something because you imagine you'd regret it. Anticipated pride can motivate achievement. You work hard because you imagine feeling proud. These anticipated emotions are predictions about future feeling states that influence current choices. We're constantly running simulations of how we'll feel if various outcomes occur, and those simulated feelings guide our decisions. This is adaptive when our predictions are accurate, but we're often wrong about what will make us happy or unhappy, how intensely we'll feel, how long feelings will last. We overestimate how happy we'll be if we get the promotion, how sad we'll be if the relationship ends. This effective forecasting error means we make decisions based on predicted emotions that don't match the actual emotions we'll experience. Understanding this can help us make better choices, questioning our assumptions about what will make us happy, learning from past predictions that were wrong, becoming more accurate emotional forecasters. The heart, it turns out, isn't great at predicting itself, imagining futures that don't quite match the realities that unfold. Emotions can be collective, shared by groups in ways that create shared identity and coordinated action. Collective effervescence, Durkheim's term for the energy and emotion generated in group gatherings, binds people together through shared feeling. Social movements harness collective anger or hope. Religious gatherings create collective transcendence. Sports events generate collective excitement. These aren't just individuals feeling the same thing separately, but a genuinely collective emotional experience. The group as a whole feeling something that emerges from but transcends individual feelings. Collective emotions are more intense than individual emotions, amplified by social presence and emotional contagion. They can be positive, collective joy at celebrations, or negative, collective fear in panics, collective hatred in mobs. Understanding collective emotions is essential for understanding human history, social movements, political change, cultural events. Much of what happens in human societies happens because groups feel things together, because shared emotion creates shared purpose, because the heart beats not just individually, but collectively, creating emotional currents that sweep through populations and shape the course of events. Emotions involve both feeling and expression, and these can be dissociated. You can feel angry without showing it, maintaining a calm exterior while seething inside. You can smile while sad, performing happiness you don't feel. This separation between felt emotion and emotional expression is called emotional labour when done deliberately, especially in work contexts. Service workers smile at rude customers. Therapists remain calm with distressed clients. Emotional labour requires suppressing genuine feelings and displaying false ones, which is exhausting and can lead to burnout. But some dissociation between feeling and expression is normal and adaptive. Not every feeling needs to be expressed immediately. Social life requires some emotional self-control, some performance of feelings we don't fully feel, some hiding of feelings we do feel. The question is balance. Too much emotional labour creates inauthenticity and exhaustion, but too little creates social chaos. We navigate constantly between authentic expression and social appropriateness, between honouring our feelings and managing their display, between inner truth and outer presentation. Emotions can be self-conscious, specifically about the self and how it's perceived by others. Shame, guilt, embarrassment and pride all involve self-evaluation and awareness of social standards. These emotions emerge later in development than basic emotions, requiring cognitive capacities like self-awareness and perspective-taking. A toddler can feel fear or joy, but not shame. Shame requires understanding that others are judging you, that you failed to meet standards, that your self-image is threatened. These self-conscious emotions are powerful motivators of social behaviour, making us care about others' opinions, making us want to live up to standards, making us avoid behaviours that would bring shame or embarrassment. They're the emotional basis of reputation, honour, social standing. But they can also be toxic when excessive. Chronic shame is debilitating, preventing growth and connection. The self-conscious emotions are double-edged, necessary for social functioning but potentially harmful when they dominate emotional life. When the self becomes an object of constant evaluation and judgment, when you can't escape awareness of how you appear to others, how you measure up, whether you're worthy. Emotions can be dispositional, stable tendencies to feel certain emotions more readily than others. Some people are dispositionally anxious, prone to worry. Others are dispositionally cheerful, finding reasons to be happy. These emotional dispositions, sometimes called temperament or personality traits, are partly genetic, partly shaped by early experience. They're relatively stable across time and situations, creating characteristic emotional patterns that define how someone typically feels. Understanding your emotional dispositions helps you know yourself. If you're dispositionally anxious, you know to question worries that might be temperament rather than reality. If you're dispositionally irritable, you know to be careful about reacting in anger. These dispositions aren't destiny. They can be modulated through various interventions, but they're also not easily changed. representing deep patterns in how your emotional system operates. Some people are born with nervous systems that activate easily, others with systems that stay calm. Some people's default state is happy, others is melancholic. These differences aren't choices or failures, but variations in human emotional architecture, different ways of being emotionally alive in the world. From individual differences in emotional life, we drift toward the mysteries of how emotions emerge from neural patterns, from electricity and chemistry becoming feeling. Emotions emerge from complex interactions among multiple brain systems, not from single dedicated circuits. The amygdala is important for fear, but also for other emotions. The prefrontal cortex regulates emotions, but also does many other things. No single brain region creates an emotion. Instead, emotions arise from dynamic interactions among networks of regions, each contributing different aspects of the emotional experience. This distributed network view explains why emotions are so complex, why they involve so many different components: bodily sensations, facial expressions, action tendencies, thoughts, memories, all coordinated through brain networks that link perception, memory, motivation, and action. It also explains why emotions can be so variable. The same networks can create different emotions depending on context, on what other systems are active, on how the networks are configured in the moment. The brain doesn't have an anger button or a sadness center, but rather flexible networks that construct emotional experiences from more basic components, assembling feelings the way you might assemble different dishes from the same ingredients, the same neural systems creating different emotional experiences depending on how they're combined and coordinated. Emotions involve neurotransmitters, chemical messengers that influence emotional states. Serotonin is associated with mood regulation, with low levels linked to depression. Dopamine is associated with reward and motivation, with imbalances linked to addiction and anhedonia. Norepinephrine is associated with arousal and alertness, elevated in anxiety and stress. These neurotransmitters don't cause emotions directly, they modulate emotional systems, making certain feelings more or less likely, more or less intense. Medications that alter neurotransmitter levels can change emotional experience. SSRIs increase serotonin and can reduce depression and anxiety. Stimulants increase dopamine and norepinephrine and can increase energy and motivation. This doesn't mean emotions are just chemicals. They're complex experiences involving many levels of organization, but chemicals are part of the story, part of the biological substrate that makes emotional experience possible. The same thought might feel devastating with low serotonin, manageable with normal levels. The same situation might feel exciting with high dopamine, boring with low levels. The chemical environment of the brain shapes how experiences feel, adding a layer of biological influence to the psychological and social factors that also shape emotional life. Emotions can be modulated by physical interventions, exercise, sleep, diet, breathing, that change the bodily state from which emotions arise. Regular exercise reduces anxiety and depression, partly through neurochemical changes, partly through improved physical health, partly through psychological effects of accomplishment and self-care. Sleep deprivation intensifies negative emotions and reduces ability to regulate them. Poor diet affects mood through various mechanisms including blood sugar fluctuations and nutrient deficiencies. Slow, deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system and reduces arousal, calming anxiety. These physical interventions work because emotions are embodied. They arise from the body's state, not just from thoughts or circumstances. Changing the body changes the feelings the body generates. This means emotional well-being isn't just about psychology, but about physiology, about taking care of the physical substrate that generates emotional experience. The body and mind aren't separate, they're aspects of a unified system, and caring for one means caring for the other. The heart that feels is also the heart that pumps blood, and both need care, attention, nourishment. Emotions can be disrupted by brain damage or disease, revealing their neural basis. Damage to the amygdala can eliminate fear responses. Damage to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex can impair decision-making by disconnecting it from emotional input. Parkinson's disease, which affects dopamine systems, often causes depression and apathy. These neurological cases show that emotions aren't just mental states, but biological processes dependent on specific brain structures and systems. They also show how much we take for granted the brain's ability to generate normal emotional experience. When that ability is damaged, the whole texture of life changes. Someone without fear might seem free but is actually in danger, unable to respond appropriately to threats. Someone without emotional input to decision-making can't decide effectively, lost in endless rational analysis without the gut feelings that guide choices. These cases reveal how essential emotions are to normal functioning, how much they contribute to navigating life successfully, how much we depend on systems we're rarely aware of until they stop working properly. Emotions involve hormones, chemical messengers that travel through the bloodstream affecting the whole body. Cortisol, released during stress, mobilizes energy and suppresses non-essential functions like digestion and reproduction. Oxytocin, released during bonding and intimacy, promotes trust and social connection. Testosterone influences aggression and dominance. Estrogen influences mood and anxiety. These hormones operate on slower timescales than neurotransmitters, creating emotional states that last minutes to hours rather than milliseconds to seconds. They link emotional experience to bodily states like stress, reproduction, and social bonding, showing how emotions are integrated into the body's broader regulatory systems. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated, which has negative health effects and maintains anxious mood. Social isolation reduces oxytocin, making connection harder and loneliness worse. Hormonal changes during puberty, pregnancy, and menopause affect emotional experience profoundly. The chemical environment of the body shapes the emotional environment of the mind, creating biological influences on feelings that operate alongside psychological and social influences, all interacting in complex ways to create the emotional experiences we live through. Emotions can be studied through facial expressions, which are remarkably consistent across cultures. Ekman identified specific facial muscle movements associated with each basic emotion: the furrowed brow of anger, the raised eyebrows of surprise, the downturned mouth of sadness. These expressions appear cross-culturally, and even in people born blind who've never seen faces, suggesting they're innate rather than learned. Facial expressions serve communication functions, broadcasting emotional states to others, but they also influence the emotion itself. Forcing a smile can actually make you feel slightly happier, a phenomenon called facial feedback. The face isn't just expressing emotion, but participating in creating it. The physical expression feeding back to influence the emotional experience. This embodied aspect of emotion means that changing your expression can change your feeling, at least slightly. It's not a cure for depression to smile, but there's a kernel of truth to the idea that physical expression and internal feeling influence each other bidirectionally. The face is both window and door to emotion. It reveals what's inside, but also shapes what's inside through its own configuration. Emotions involve the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary bodily functions like heart rate, breathing, and digestion. The sympathetic branch activates during stress and arousal, preparing for action, increasing heart rate, dilating pupils, diverting blood to muscles. The parasympathetic branch activates during rest and recovery, promoting calm, slowing heart rate, promoting digestion, conserving energy. Most emotions involve some combination of sympathetic and parasympathetic activation, creating the specific bodily signature of each feeling. Fear is high sympathetic activation. Contentment is high parasympathetic activation. The autonomic nervous system is why emotions feel the way they do in the body, why anxiety involves a racing heart, why relaxation involves slow breathing. It's also why interventions targeting the autonomic nervous system can change emotions. Slow breathing activates the parasympathetic system and calms anxiety. Exercise discharges sympathetic activation and reduces stress. Understanding the autonomic basis of emotion reveals another level at which feelings are embodied, rooted in automatic bodily processes we don't consciously control, but that profoundly shape emotional experience. Emotions can be influenced by interoception, awareness of internal bodily states like heartbeat, breathing, and gut sensations. People with high interoceptive awareness are more aware of their emotional states, better able to identify and differentiate feelings. This makes sense given that emotions are partly bodily experiences. If you're more aware of your body, you're more aware of the bodily aspects of emotion. Interoceptive awareness can be trained through practices like mindfulness and body scanning, learning to notice subtle internal sensations. This increased awareness can improve emotional regulation by providing earlier warning of emotional states, allowing intervention before emotions become overwhelming. It can also improve emotional granularity, allowing more precise identification of feelings based on their distinctive bodily signatures. The body is constantly sending information about its state, and emotions are partly the conscious experience of that information. Learning to read the body signals more accurately means learning to read emotions more accurately, understanding the heart by understanding the heartbeat, understanding feelings by understanding the flesh that feels them. If your eyes are growing heavy, don't fight it. Sleep is welcome here. The theories will continue whether you hear them or not, a quiet voice in the darkness. Emotions can be implicit, influencing behavior without conscious awareness. You might avoid someone without knowing you're angry at them. You might seek out certain situations without realizing they make you happy. These implicit emotions operate below the threshold of consciousness, shaping choices and behaviors without explicit feeling states. They're measured in psychology through indirect methods like reaction times and physiological responses rather than self-report. Someone might consciously believe they're not prejudiced, but show implicit negative emotions towards certain groups. Someone might consciously think they're over a relationship, but show implicit emotional responses to reminders of the person. These implicit emotions reveal that the emotional system operates partly outside awareness, processing information and generating responses we don't consciously experience. This doesn't mean we're not responsible for implicit emotions. They're still our emotions. But it does mean emotional life is more complex than what we consciously feel, extending into unconscious territories we can only access indirectly, through careful observation of our own patterns and reactions. Emotions can be regulated through attention, deliberately directing focus toward or away from emotional stimuli. You can reduce anxiety by directing attention away from threats. You can increase joy by savoring positive experiences. You can reduce anger by avoiding dwelling on provocations. This attentional regulation is one of the most basic emotional skills, often operating automatically, but also available for deliberate use. Where attention goes, emotion follows. Focusing on threats increases fear. Focusing on losses increases sadness. Focusing on blessings increases gratitude. The challenge is that attention is often captured automatically by emotional stimuli, especially threats, making it hard to look away from what frightens or angers us. Learning to control attention despite emotional pull is a key skill in emotional regulation, allowing you to disengage from rumination, to redirect focus from negative to positive, to choose what you feed with attention and what you starve. The mind's spotlight illuminates what it shines on, and emotions grow in that light. Learning to move the spotlight skillfully means learning to shape emotional experience through the simple but powerful act of choosing where to look. Emotions involve motivation, preparing and directing behavior toward goals. Fear motivates escape. Anger motivates confrontation. Sadness motivates withdrawal. Joy motivates approach and engagement. These motivational aspects are central to what emotions are. They're not just feelings, but action tendencies, ways of being ready to respond to situations. This is why emotions feel urgent, why they push for expression and action. They're designed to move us, to motivate behavior that addresses whatever triggered the emotion. Sometimes this motivation is helpful, pushing us to act in adaptive ways. Sometimes it's problematic, pushing us toward actions we'll regret. Emotional regulation often involves managing these motivational impulses, feeling the emotion without necessarily acting on its behavioral push. You can feel angry without attacking, feel afraid without fleeing, feel sad without withdrawing completely. The emotion still serves its function of alerting you to something important, but you have space to choose whether to follow its motivational pull. This gap between feeling and action is where freedom lives, where you can acknowledge what you feel while choosing what you do. Emotions can be complex, involving multiple layers and components that might not align. You might feel happy about an achievement while simultaneously anxious about new responsibilities it brings. You might feel love for someone while also feeling frustrated by their behavior. These complex emotions involve multiple appraisals happening simultaneously, different aspects of a situation triggering different emotional responses. The complexity is part of being human, part of responding to a world that's rarely simple or one-dimensional. Most situations have multiple meanings, multiple implications, multiple aspects that trigger different emotions. Learning to hold this complexity, to acknowledge multiple feelings at once without needing to resolve them into a single clear emotion, is part of emotional maturity. Life doesn't offer pure emotional states very often. It offers mixtures, combinations, contradictions. The heart is large enough to hold them all, to feel multiple things at once, to be ambivalent and uncertain and still okay, still human, still whole. Emotions can be shared through emotional contagion, automatically mimicking others' expressions and catching their feelings. When someone yawns, you yawn. When someone smiles, you smile. These automatic mimicry processes create shared emotional states, synchronizing feelings across individuals. This is the most primitive form of empathy, not requiring cognitive understanding of others' emotions, but simply catching them through unconscious mimicry of their expressions and postures. Emotional contagion is why moods spread through groups, why one person's anxiety can make everyone tense, why laughter is contagious. It operates below conscious awareness, through mirror neuron systems that fire when observing others' actions and expressions. This automatic sharing of emotional states is the foundation of social connection, creating a kind of emotional resonance that binds people together. We're not emotionally isolated individuals, but nodes in an emotional network, constantly influencing and being influenced by others' feeling states, our emotions rippling outward to touch others, their emotions rippling inward to touch us. The boundaries between self and other are more permeable than we usually imagine, at least emotionally. Emotions involve subjective experience, the felt quality of what it's like to be in an emotional state. This phenomenological aspect of emotion is what makes emotions matter to us, not just the bodily changes or behavioral tendencies, but the way it feels to be afraid, to be joyful, to be sad. This subjective experience is private, accessible only to the person feeling it, making emotions both universal and deeply personal. Everyone knows what sadness feels like, but your sadness is yours alone, experienced in a way no one else can fully access. This subjective dimension is also what makes emotions meaningful. They're not just biological processes, but lived experiences, part of what makes life worth living or difficult to bear. The joy of love, the pain of loss, the excitement of discovery. These felt experiences are central to human existence, to what makes us care about anything, to what gives life its emotional colour. Without subjective experience, emotions would be just mechanical processes. With it, they're the texture of consciousness itself, the way existence feels from the inside. Emotions can be influenced by expectations, with the same situation creating different emotions depending on what you expected. A B grade might feel disappointing if you expected an A, satisfying if you expected a C. The objective outcome is the same, but the emotional response depends on expectations. This is why managing expectations can be an emotional regulation strategy. Lowering expectations reduces disappointment, though it might also reduce motivation. It's also why surprise is an emotion. It arises specifically when reality violates expectations, when what happens differs from what you predicted. Our emotional responses aren't just to what happens, but to the relationship between what happens and what we expected to happen. This means emotions are partly about mental models of the world, about predictions and their confirmation or violation. We're constantly predicting what will happen, and emotions arise partly from how those predictions fare. Accurate predictions feel different from violated ones. Better than expected outcomes feel better than expected outcomes that match predictions. The heart responds not just to reality, but to the gap between reality and expectation, between what is and what we thought would be. Emotions can be ritualized, expressed through culturally specified forms that shape and contain emotional experience. Funerals provide structured ways to express grief. Weddings provide structured ways to express joy. Religious rituals provide structured ways to express devotion, or repentance. These ritual forms aren't just external, they shape internal emotional experience, giving it form and meaning. Grieving within a funeral ritual feels different from grieving alone. The ritual contains the emotion, provides a framework for it, connects it to cultural meanings and community support. Rituals can amplify emotions, creating intense shared experiences. They can also moderate emotions, preventing them from becoming overwhelming. They transform private feelings into public expressions, individual experiences into collective ones. In cultures with rich emotional rituals, people have more resources for processing emotions, more ways to express and understand feelings. In cultures that lack such rituals, emotions might feel more chaotic, less meaningful, harder to navigate. The heart needs not just to feel, but to express feeling in forms that connect it to culture, to community, to meaning beyond the individual moment. Another theory explores a related mystery, one that touches the strange boundary where emotions meet time itself. Emotions have temporal dynamics, patterns of onset, peak, and decay. Some emotions rise quickly and fade quickly, startle, surprise. Others build slowly and persist, grief, depression. Understanding these temporal patterns helps predict how long a feeling will last, when it will be most intense. Anger typically peaks within minutes, and then begins to fade if not re-triggered. Sadness can persist for hours or days, waxing and waning but maintaining a background presence. These patterns are part of each emotion's signature, as characteristic as their associated thoughts or bodily sensations. They're also important for regulation. Knowing that anger will peak soon might help you wait it out rather than acting on it. Knowing that sadness will eventually lift might provide hope during dark moments. Emotions are processes in time, not static states. They have beginnings, middles, and ends. They change as you experience them, intensifying and then fading, like waves that rise and fall. Nothing lasts forever, not joy, not suffering, not any feeling state. This impermanence is both comforting and sad, the promise that pain will pass and the knowledge that pleasure will too. Emotions can be background states that colour experience without being focal. You might be in a generally anxious state that makes everything seem more threatening. You might be in a generally content state that makes everything seem more pleasant. These background emotions, sometimes called moods, are like emotional weather, setting the tone for all foreground experiences. When anxious, small annoyances become major frustrations. When content, Major frustrations become minor annoyances. The background emotional state acts as a filter, changing how you perceive and respond to events. These background states are often less connected to specific events than foreground emotions. You might not know why you're in a bad mood, just that you are. They're also more persistent, lasting hours or days rather than minutes. Understanding that you're in a background emotional state can help you not overinterpret specific events. Maybe the situation isn't as bad as it seems. Maybe you're just in a bad mood that's colouring everything negatively. The emotional atmosphere you inhabit shapes the emotional weather you experience, creating a context that influences all specific feelings. Emotions involve goals, arising when progress toward goals is affected. You feel joy when moving toward goals, frustration when blocked, sadness when goals become unattainable. This goal relevance is central to many theories of emotion. Emotions are fundamentally about your relationship to what matters to you. Different people have different goals, so the same event triggers different emotions. Failing a test devastates someone whose goal is academic success, but barely affects someone who doesn't care about grades. Emotions tell you how you're doing relative to your goals, providing feedback about whether to continue current strategies or change course. They're a monitoring system, constantly evaluating whether circumstances support or threaten what you care about. This means understanding your emotions requires understanding your goals. What are you trying to achieve, protect, avoid? Your emotional life is a map of what matters to you, with intense emotions marking the territories of deep importance, mild emotions marking areas of lesser concern. To know what you feel is to know what you value, what you're reaching for, what you're trying to protect or achieve. Emotions can be meta-emotions, feelings about feelings. You might feel ashamed of feeling angry. You might feel anxious about feeling sad. These secondary emotions complicate emotional experience, adding layers of judgment and reaction. Sometimes meta-emotions are more problematic than primary emotions. The shame about anger causes more suffering than the anger itself. Other times, meta-emotions are adaptive. Feeling good about feeling grateful might reinforce gratitude. These layered emotional responses reveal how self-aware and self-reflective human emotional life is. We don't just feel, we feel about our feelings, evaluate them, judge them, have emotional responses to our emotional responses. This can create complex tangles, feeling bad about feeling bad, anxious about being anxious, or it can create emotional wisdom, feeling compassionate toward your own sadness, accepting your fear without judgment, learning to notice meta-emotions and sometimes let them go. To feel what you feel without adding layers of judgment is part of emotional maturity. The heart doesn't need to judge itself, doesn't need to feel ashamed of its feelings. It can simply feel, simply be, simply experience what arises without adding commentary or criticism. Emotions can be transformative, changing not just in intensity, but in quality over time. Grief can transform into acceptance. Anger can transform into forgiveness. Fear can transform into courage. These transformations aren't just emotional regulation. They're fundamental shifts in how you relate to situations, in what emotions arise. They often require time, processing, sometimes deliberate work. You can't force transformation, but you can create conditions that allow it. Expressing emotions, understanding them, getting support, finding meaning. These emotional transformations are often turning points in life, moments when your emotional relationship to something fundamental shifts. The death that devastated you becomes something you've integrated, still sad but no longer overwhelming. The betrayal that enraged you becomes something you've forgiven, still wrong but no longer consuming. These transformations are mysterious, not entirely under conscious control, emerging from processes that work below awareness. The heart has its own wisdom about when and how to transform pain into something more bearable, when to let go, when to hold on, when to change what it feels about unchangeable circumstances. If some theories feel confusing, that's okay. They're meant to be felt more than understood, like music you don't need to analyze to enjoy. Emotions involve narrative, stories we tell about why we feel what we feel. You feel sad and create a story about loss. You feel anxious and create a story about threat. These narratives aren't just descriptions of emotion, but part of the emotion itself, shaping and sustaining it. The same bodily state might become different emotions depending on the story you tell about it. A racing heart becomes anxiety if you tell a story about danger, excitement if you tell a story about opportunity. These emotional narratives can be helpful, making sense of feelings and connecting them to circumstances. They can also be problematic, creating stories that maintain or intensify emotions unnecessarily. Rumination is a narrative process, telling yourself stories about problems that keep negative emotions alive. Reappraisal is also a narrative process, telling yourself different stories that change emotional responses. We're storytelling creatures, and our emotional lives are partly the stories we tell ourselves about our feelings, about why we feel them, about what they mean. Learning to notice these narratives and sometimes question them, to ask if the story is true or helpful, to consider alternative stories, this is a path to emotional wisdom, to freeing yourself from stories that cause unnecessary suffering. Emotions can be aesthetic responses to form and pattern, not just to content. The way something is expressed can be more emotionally powerful than what's expressed. A beautifully written, sad story moves us more than a clumsily written one. Even if the content is the same, music creates emotions through pure form, rhythm, melody, harmony, without any semantic content. These aesthetic emotions suggest that emotions respond to pattern and structure, to beauty and elegance, to formal qualities independent of meaning. This is part of what makes art powerful. It creates emotional experiences through form, through the way it shapes perception and attention. The emotional impact of a painting comes partly from its colours and composition, not just from what it depicts. The emotional impact of poetry comes partly from its rhythm and sound, not just from what it says. These formal aspects of experience trigger emotional responses, suggesting that the emotional system is sensitive to pattern and beauty at a fundamental level, responding to how things are arranged and structured, to the aesthetic dimension of experience that exists alongside the semantic dimension. Emotions involve the body's periphery, with changes in heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, and other bodily systems. These peripheral changes aren't just consequences of emotion, but part of what emotion is, contributing to emotional experience through feedback from body to brain. When your heart races, that information goes to your brain and contributes to feeling fear or excitement. When your muscles tense, that contributes to feeling anger or stress. This peripheral feedback is why bodily interventions can change emotions. Changing your breathing changes the feedback your brain receives, which changes emotional experience. It's also why emotions feel the way they do, why they're not just thoughts, but embodied experiences. The emotion is partly in the body, in the racing heart and tense muscles and shallow breathing, not just in the brain. Mind and body are unified in emotional experience, with the body state contributing essentially to what you feel. The heart that beats faster, the lungs that breathe quicker, the muscles that tense, these are part of the emotion itself, not separate from it. The body and mind creating emotional experience together in constant interaction. Emotions can be cultivated, deliberately developed through practice and intention. You can cultivate gratitude by regularly noticing things to be grateful for. You can cultivate compassion by practicing seeing others suffering and wishing them well. You can cultivate joy by savouring positive experiences. These cultivation practices work by repeatedly activating certain emotional states, strengthening the neural pathways that generate them, making them more accessible and more frequent. This is the basis of many contemplative practices, not just accepting whatever emotions arise, but actively cultivating beneficial ones. The heart can be trained, shaped, developed like any other capacity. This doesn't mean forcing emotions or being inauthentic, but rather creating conditions that allow certain emotions to arise more naturally. You can't force yourself to feel grateful, but you can practice noticing things that naturally evoke gratitude, and over time, gratitude becomes more frequent and more accessible. The emotional life you have is partly the emotional life you cultivate, the result of what you practice, what you attend to, what you reinforce through repetition and attention. Emotions can be defensive, protecting the self from threatening information or experiences. Anger can defend against feeling hurt. Contempt can defend against feeling inferior. Indifference can defend against feeling loss. These defensive emotions are secondary responses, arising to protect against more vulnerable primary emotions. They're like emotional armor covering softer feelings underneath. Understanding defensive emotions requires looking beneath them to what they're defending against. The person who responds to criticism with anger might be defending against shame. The person who responds to rejection with contempt might be defending against sadness. These defenses aren't always conscious. You might not know you're defending against something, might not be aware of the vulnerable emotion underneath the defensive one. Therapy often involves identifying defensive emotions and accessing the primary emotions they protect, allowing those primary emotions to be felt and processed rather than kept hidden under defensive armor. The heart builds walls to protect itself, but those walls also isolate, preventing connection and healing. Learning to lower defenses, to feel vulnerable emotions without immediately covering them with defensive ones, is part of emotional healing and growth. Emotions involve social comparison, with feelings arising from how you compare to others. You might feel proud when you do better than others, envious when others do better than you. These social comparison emotions are specifically about relative standing, not absolute outcomes. You might feel worse getting a B when everyone else got A's than getting a C when everyone else got D's. The same objective outcome creates different emotions depending on social context. These comparison processes are often automatic, happening without conscious intention. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others, using them as reference points for evaluating our own situations. This can be motivating. Seeing others succeed might inspire you to work harder. It can also be demoralizing. Seeing others succeed might make you feel inadequate. Social media has intensified these comparison processes, providing constant exposure to others' curated successes, creating more opportunities for comparison and potentially more negative social comparison emotions. Understanding that emotions are partly about comparison, not just about absolute circumstances, helps explain why we can feel bad even when objectively things are fine, why context matters so much to emotional experience. The heart measures itself against other hearts, finding its place in a social landscape. Emotions can be somatic markers, bodily signals that guide decision-making through feeling rather than reasoning. When you have a gut feeling about something, that's a somatic marker, a bodily sensation that carries information about whether something is good or bad for you. These markers are based on past experience, the body remembering what led to good or bad outcomes even when you can't consciously recall the details. They allow fast decision-making without conscious deliberation, guiding you toward beneficial choices and away from harmful ones. Someone with damage to brain regions that process somatic markers can't make effective decisions, getting lost in endless rational analysis without the gut feelings that would guide choice. This reveals how essential emotions are to rationality, how feeling and thinking work together in effective decision-making. The rational brain needs input from the emotional brain to function well. Pure reason without emotion is paralyzed, unable to value options or commit to choices. The gut feelings we sometimes dismiss as irrational are actually sophisticated summaries of past learning, the body's wisdom about what works and what doesn't, expressed through feeling rather than thought. Emotions can be existentially meaningful, connecting us to fundamental aspects of being alive. Love connects us to others, transcending isolation. Or connects us to something larger than ourselves, transcending ordinary experience. Grief connects us to the reality of loss and impermanence, to the preciousness of what we've had. These emotions aren't just pleasant or unpleasant, but meaningful, giving life depth and significance. They're responses to things that matter, to realities that deserve emotional recognition. A life without these emotions would be impoverished, lacking connection to what makes existence valuable. The pain of grief is the price of love. If you never loved, you'd never grieve, but you'd also miss the meaning that love provides. The vulnerability of love is inseparable from its value. If you couldn't be hurt, connection wouldn't matter as much. Emotions are how we know what matters, how we register significance, how we live with awareness of meaning rather than just mechanically going through motions. The heart's responses to life's fundamental realities, connection, loss, beauty, mortality, are what make us fully human, fully alive, fully present to existence in all its complexity and profundity. There's no test at the end, no need to prove you are listening. Your mind can wander where it wants, to memories, to dreams, to nothing at all. Emotions can be spiritual, connecting us to experiences of the sacred, the transcendent, the divine. Religious awe, spiritual peace, mystical union. These emotions involve a sense of connection to something beyond ordinary reality, something ultimate and meaningful. They're characterized by self-transcendence, a dissolving of boundaries between self and other, between self and universe. These spiritual emotions might be evolutionary adaptations that helped create social cohesion through shared religious experience, or they might be genuine encounters with transcendent reality. The interpretation depends on metaphysical beliefs. Either way, they're powerful emotional experiences that many people find deeply meaningful and transformative. They provide a sense of connection, purpose, and meaning that transcends everyday concerns. The heart in these moments touches something it experiences as infinite, eternal, sacred. Whether that's a property of reality or a property of consciousness doesn't change the emotional power of the experience, the sense of being connected to something vast and meaningful that puts ordinary concerns in perspective and provides a kind of peace that surpasses understanding. Emotions can be playful, arising in contexts of play and humour, laughter, delight, amusement. These emotions are specifically about non-serious engagement with the world, about finding joy in absurdity, incongruity, surprise. Play emotions are important throughout life, not just in childhood. They provide relief from seriousness, create social bonds through shared laughter, offer perspective on problems by approaching them playfully. Humour is a sophisticated emotional response that requires seeing multiple perspectives simultaneously, recognizing incongruity, appreciating absurdity. It's a kind of cognitive flexibility expressed emotionally, the ability to not take things too seriously, to find lightness even in difficulty. People who can laugh at themselves, who can find humour in adversity, tend to be more resilient and have better mental health. The capacity for playful emotions is part of emotional health, preventing life from becoming too heavy, too serious, too grim. The heart needs not just to feel deeply, but also to feel lightly, to laugh, to play, to find joy in silliness and absurdity. To remember that not everything needs to be taken seriously, that sometimes the best response to life's difficulties is a laugh. Emotions involve energy, with different emotions associated with different levels of activation. Excitement is high energy. Depression is low energy. This energetic dimension of emotion is part of what makes them feel the way they do. Excitement feels energizing, depression feels depleting. These energy levels aren't just metaphorical but physiological, involving actual changes in metabolism, arousal, and available energy. High energy emotions mobilize resources, making you ready for action. Low energy emotions conserve resources, making you want to rest. Understanding this energetic dimension helps explain why some emotions are exhausting. Sustained high arousal emotions like anxiety burn energy, leaving you depleted. It also explains why some emotional states involve fatigue. Depression's low energy isn't laziness, but a real change in available energy. Managing emotional energy is part of emotional self-care, recognizing when you need rest, when you need activation, how to balance high energy and low energy states. The heart has its own energy economy, spending and conserving, activating and resting, and learning to manage that economy is part of taking care of yourself emotionally. Emotions can be congruent or incongruent with situations, appropriate or inappropriate to circumstances. Feeling afraid when in danger is congruent. Feeling afraid when completely safe is incongruent. This congruence matters for emotional health. Congruent emotions are adaptive, helping you respond appropriately to situations. Incongruent emotions are problematic, leading to responses that don't fit circumstances. Anxiety disorders involve incongruent fear, feeling terrified when there's no real danger. Depression involves incongruent sadness, feeling hopeless when circumstances aren't actually hopeless. These incongruencies often stem from past experiences, the emotional system responding to current situations as if they were past situations. Someone with trauma might feel terror in situations that resemble the trauma but aren't actually dangerous. Someone with depression might feel hopeless about situations that others would see as manageable. Healing often involves restoring congruence, helping the emotional system respond to present reality rather than past experience. Updating emotional responses to match current circumstances. The heart sometimes lives in the past, responding to old threats and old losses, and learning to bring it into the present is part of emotional healing. Emotions can be communicated verbally, putting feelings into words that others can understand. This emotional communication is essential for social life, allowing us to share inner experiences, to coordinate with others, to receive support. But translating emotion into language is challenging. Feelings are complex, multifaceted, sometimes contradictory, while words are discrete and linear. Some emotions are hard to name, existing in the spaces between words. Some cultures have richer emotional vocabularies than others, more words for subtle distinctions between feelings. The act of putting emotions into words can itself change the emotions, making them clearer, less overwhelming, more manageable. This is part of why therapy works. Talking about feelings helps process them, makes them less confusing, integrates them into coherent narratives. The heart speaks a language that isn't quite the same as the language of words, and the translation is always imperfect, always incomplete. But the attempt to translate is valuable, helping us understand ourselves and helping others understand us, creating bridges of language across the gaps between private inner worlds. Emotions can be anticipatory, preparing for future events before they occur. You feel nervous before a performance, excited before a trip, dreading before a difficult conversation. These anticipatory emotions serve preparatory functions, getting you ready for what's coming. They can also cause unnecessary suffering when you dread things that turn out fine, when anxiety about the future is worse than the future itself. Learning to distinguish between useful anticipatory emotions that help you prepare and useless ones that just create suffering is part of emotional wisdom. Sometimes the anticipation is the worst part, the actual event less difficult than the dread beforehand. Sometimes anticipatory excitement is the best part, better than the actual experience. We live partly in imagined futures, feeling emotions about things that haven't happened yet, and those emotions shape present experience even though they are about things that might never occur. The heart reaches forward in time, feeling the future before it arrives, preparing for possibilities that may or may not materialize, living in multiple temporal dimensions at once. Emotions involve meaning-making, the process of understanding what events mean for your life. You don't just experience events, you interpret them, and those interpretations generate emotions. The same event can mean different things to different people, generating different emotions. Losing a job might mean failure to one person, opportunity to another. The meaning you make determines the emotion you feel. This meaning-making process is partly conscious, partly unconscious, shaped by beliefs, values, past experiences, cultural frameworks. It's also changeable. You can make different meanings of the same event, which changes your emotional response. This is the basis of cognitive therapy, identifying meanings that generate problematic emotions and considering alternative meanings that generate more adaptive emotions. The heart responds not to events themselves, but to what events mean, to the significance you assign them, to how you understand their implications for what matters to you. Learning to notice the meanings you're making, to question them, to consider alternatives. This is a path to emotional flexibility and resilience, to responding to life with wisdom rather than just reacting automatically. If you've drifted in and out, that's perfect. These theories are companions, keeping you company as you drift, asking nothing, demanding nothing, just offering gentle wonder. Emotions can be bittersweet, containing both positive and negative elements simultaneously. Nostalgia is bittersweet. Happiness about the past mixed with sadness that it's gone. Graduation is bittersweet. Joy about accomplishment mixed with sadness about endings. These bittersweet emotions are complex, resisting simple categorization as good or bad. They're responses to situations that are genuinely mixed, containing both gain and loss, both joy and sorrow. Life offers many such situations, moments of transition, of growth that involves leaving things behind, of joy tinged with awareness of impermanence. The capacity to feel bittersweet emotions, to hold both positive and negative together without needing to resolve them into one or the other, is part of emotional maturity. It's an acceptance of life's complexity, of the fact that good things often involve some loss, that growth involves leaving things behind, that nothing is purely positive or purely negative. The heart is large enough to hold these contradictions, to feel happiness and sadness at once, to be moved by the bittersweetness of existence itself. Emotions can be intense or mild, varying in strength from barely noticeable to overwhelming. This intensity dimension is independent of valence. You can have mild happiness or intense happiness, mild fear or intense fear. Intensity matters because it affects how much emotions influence behavior and thought. Intense emotions are more likely to disrupt ongoing activities, to demand attention, to push for expression. Mild emotions can be present without dominating experience, colouring it without controlling it. Some people tend toward intense emotions. They feel everything strongly. Others tend toward mild emotions. They feel things, but not intensely. These differences in emotional intensity are partly temperamental, partly learned, partly situational. Understanding your typical intensity level helps you know yourself. If you tend toward intensity, you know emotions will feel strong and might need active regulation. If you tend toward mildness, you know emotions won't overwhelm you but might be easy to ignore or dismiss. The heart has its own volume control, and learning to adjust it, to turn down intensity when needed, to turn it up when emotions are being suppressed, is part of emotional skill. Emotions can be shared through empathy, feeling what others feel by taking their perspective. This is different from emotional contagion, which is automatic. Empathy is more cognitive, involving understanding others' situations and imagining how they feel. It requires perspective taking, the ability to see the world from another's point of view. Empathy allows for compassion, for caring about others' suffering, for wanting to help. It's the basis of prosocial behaviour, of altruism, of moral concern for others. Without empathy, we'd be isolated in our own emotional worlds, unable to connect with others' experiences. But empathy can also be painful. Feeling others' suffering is difficult, especially when you can't help. Empathy fatigue is real, particularly for people in caring professions who constantly encounter others' pain. Learning to empathize without being overwhelmed, to care without taking on others' emotions as your own, is a delicate balance. The heart can hold both your feelings and awareness of others' feelings, resonating with their experience while remaining anchored in your own, caring without merging, connecting without losing yourself. Emotions can be authentic or performed, genuinely felt or displayed for social purposes. Sometimes you perform emotions you don't feel, smiling when you're not happy, acting interested when you're bored. Sometimes you suppress emotions you do feel, hiding anger, concealing sadness. This distinction between felt and displayed emotion is part of social life, part of managing how you present yourself to others. Complete authenticity isn't always appropriate or possible. Some situations require emotional performance, but chronic inauthenticity has costs, creating a gap between inner experience and outer expression that can feel alienating. Finding balance between authentic expression and social appropriateness is an ongoing negotiation, knowing when to be genuine and when to perform, when to show what you feel, and when to keep it private. The heart has both a public face and a private reality, and managing the relationship between them is part of emotional life in social contexts. Complete transparency isn't always wise, but complete performance isn't sustainable. Somewhere between those extremes lies emotional authenticity that's both genuine and socially skillful. Emotions can be resilient, bouncing back from negative states relatively quickly, or vulnerable, struggling to recover. Emotional resilience is partly temperamental, partly learned through experience. Resilient people experience negative emotions but don't stay stuck in them. They recover, move forward, maintain perspective. Vulnerable people get stuck, ruminate, struggle to shift out of negative states. Resilience can be strengthened through various practices, cultivating positive emotions, building social support, developing coping skills, finding meaning. It's not about never feeling negative emotions, but about recovering from them, about the emotional system's ability to return to baseline after disturbance. Some people are naturally more resilient, their emotional systems springing back easily. Others need to work at it, to deliberately practice skills that build resilience. The heart can be strengthened like a muscle, trained to recover more quickly from emotional blows, to maintain balance despite difficulties. Resilience doesn't mean you won't suffer. It means you'll recover from suffering, that emotional wounds will heal, that you'll find your way back to equilibrium even after being knocked off balance. Emotions can be moral imperatives, feelings that demand action. When you feel compassion, you feel pulled to help. When you feel outrage, you feel pushed to confront injustice. These moral emotions aren't just feelings, but calls to action, internal demands that you do something. They're how conscience manifests emotionally, how moral principles become felt imperatives rather than abstract ideas. Sometimes these moral emotions are clear and unambiguous. You feel compassion and help, feel outraged and speak up. Other times they're complicated. You feel multiple moral emotions pulling in different directions, or you feel moral emotions that conflict with self-interest. Learning to listen to moral emotions while also thinking critically about them is part of ethical life. Not every feeling of outrage is justified. Sometimes you're wrong about what's unjust. Not every feeling of compassion is helpful. Sometimes helping would do more harm than good. But these moral emotions are important signals, alerting you to ethical dimensions of situations, making you care about right and wrong in ways that pure reason can't. The heart has its own moral sense, its own compass pointing toward what matters ethically. Emotions can be layered in time, with present feelings containing echoes of past feelings and anticipations of future feelings. When you feel sad, you might also remember past sadness and fear, future sadness, creating a complex temporal layering. This temporal depth is part of what makes human emotions complex. They're not just responses to present moments, but contain past and future within them. Memory and anticipation fold into present feeling, creating emotional experiences that span time. This is why emotions can be so powerful. They're not just about now, but about always, about patterns that repeat across your life, about emotional themes that recur. Understanding this temporal dimension helps explain why some emotions feel so big. They're not just about the current situation, but about all similar situations, past and future, condensed into present feeling. The heart lives in multiple times at once, feeling the past as memory, the present as sensation, the future as anticipation, all woven together into complex emotional experiences that transcend the moment. Emotions can be cultural performances, expressing not just individual feelings but cultural values and identities. How you express emotions, which emotions you express when you express them, all are shaped by cultural scripts that define appropriate emotional behavior. Some cultures value emotional expressiveness, others value restraint. Some cultures encourage certain emotions, others discourage them. These cultural patterns shape individual emotional experience, teaching you what to feel and how to feel it. Your emotions aren't just personal but cultural, expressing your membership in particular communities, your adherence to particular values. Understanding this cultural dimension reveals how much of what feels natural about emotions is actually learned, how much is specific to your cultural context rather than universal. The heart beats in cultural rhythms, expressing feelings in culturally specific ways, performing emotions according to cultural scripts that feel natural but are actually learned, connecting you to communities through shared emotional patterns that mark you as belonging to particular groups, particular traditions, particular ways of being human. We're near the end now. Let the final theories wash over you like gentle waves, carrying you deeper into rest, into calm, into the soft embrace of sleep. Emotions can be wisdom, containing knowledge that reason alone can't access. Your fear might know something is dangerous before you can articulate why. Your joy might recognize something valuable before you can explain its value. These emotional knowings are forms of wisdom, rapid intuitive assessments based on vast amounts of implicit learning. The emotional system processes information faster than conscious thought, drawing on pattern recognition and past experience to generate feelings that guide you. This emotional wisdom isn't infallible. Emotions can be wrong based on outdated information or inappropriate generalizations, but they're also often right in ways that aren't immediately obvious, sensing patterns that conscious analysis would miss. Learning to listen to emotional wisdom while also thinking critically about it, to honor feelings while also questioning them, is part of mature emotional life. The heart knows things the mind doesn't, and the mind knows things the heart doesn't. Wisdom comes from integrating both, from letting feeling and thinking inform each other, from recognizing that emotions are a form of intelligence, a way of knowing that complements rational analysis. Emotions can be gifts, even painful ones. Sadness is the price of love. Fear is the price of caring about survival. Anger is the price of valuing justice. These painful emotions arise because you care about something, because something matters to you. They're not punishments or failures, but signs of your values, your commitments, your capacity to care. A life without sadness would be a life without love. A life without fear would be a life without caring about anything. The painful emotions, as much as the pleasant ones, are part of being fully alive, fully human, fully engaged with a world that contains both beauty and suffering. Learning to see emotions as gifts rather than problems, to welcome even painful feelings as signs of your humanity, transforms your relationship with emotional life. The heart's capacity to hurt is inseparable from its capacity to love, to hope, to care. The vulnerability is the point, not a flaw. The openness to pain is what allows for joy. The emotions, all of them, are the price and the gift of being alive. Emotions can be mysterious, arising for reasons you don't understand, connecting to depths you can't access. Sometimes you feel sad without knowing why. Sometimes you cry at something that shouldn't matter. Sometimes you're moved in ways you can't explain. These mysterious emotions remind you that you're not transparent to yourself, that much of your inner life operates outside awareness, that the heart has reasons that reason doesn't know. This mystery isn't a problem to solve, but a reality to accept. You don't need to understand every emotion, to trace every feeling to its source, to make everything explicable. Some emotions are meant to be felt, not analyzed, experienced, not explained. The heart keeps secrets even from itself, responding to patterns and connections that consciousness can't access, feeling things that thinking can't comprehend. Learning to be comfortable with this mystery, to feel without always needing to understand, to let emotions be what they are without demanding they make sense. This is a kind of emotional wisdom, an acceptance of the heart's depths and their resistance to complete illumination. Emotions can be healing, part of how you process and recover from difficult experiences. Crying releases tension. Expressing anger can provide closure. Feeling sadness allows you to acknowledge loss. These emotional processes aren't just venting, but actual healing. Ways the psyche processes and integrates experiences that would otherwise remain undigested. Suppressing emotions prevents this healing, keeping experiences stuck, unprocessed, continuing to affect you in unconscious ways. Allowing emotions to flow through you, to be felt fully and expressed appropriately, allows healing to occur. This doesn't mean drowning in emotions or being controlled by them, but rather allowing them their natural course, rising, peaking, fading. Each emotion has work to do, information to convey, healing to facilitate. Letting emotions do their work rather than fighting them is part of emotional health. The heart heals itself through feeling, through the natural process of emotional experience that moves through stages toward resolution and integration. Trust that process, even when it's painful, even when it takes time. The heart knows how to heal itself if you let it. Emotions can be connections, the invisible threads that bind you to others, to the world, to life itself. Love connects you to people. Compassion connects you to suffering, or connects you to beauty. These emotional connections are what make life meaningful, what make you part of something larger than yourself. Without emotions, you'd be isolated, disconnected, alone in a world that couldn't touch you. The capacity to feel is the capacity to connect, to be affected by what happens, to matter and to have things matter to you. This vulnerability to emotional connection is what makes you human, what allows for relationship, community, meaning. The heart reaches out through feeling, touching others, touched by others, woven into a web of emotional connections that span from intimate relationships to humanity as a whole, to the universe itself. These connections are real even though they're invisible, powerful even though they're intangible, the fundamental reality of emotional life. That you're not alone, not separate, not isolated, but connected through feeling to everything that can be felt. Emotions can be teachers, showing you what matters, what needs attention, what requires change. Each emotion carries a message, if you're willing to listen. Fear teaches you about danger. Sadness teaches you about loss. Anger teaches you about boundaries. Joy teaches you about value. These emotional lessons aren't always obvious. They require attention, reflection, willingness to learn. But the heart is constantly teaching, constantly offering wisdom through feeling, constantly guiding you toward what you need to know. Learning to listen to emotions as teachers, rather than just experiencing them as sensations, transforms your relationship with them. They're not just things happening to you, but information for you. guidance from the wise part of yourself that speaks through feeling rather than words. The heart's curriculum is lifelong, each emotion a lesson in how to live, how to be, how to navigate existence with wisdom and grace. Pay attention to what you feel. It's trying to teach you something. Emotions can be acceptance, the peaceful recognition of what is. Not all emotions are about changing things. Some are about accepting them. Grief accepts loss. Contentment accepts sufficiency. Serenity accepts impermanence. These accepting emotions don't fight reality, but embrace it, finding peace in what is rather than struggling against it. This doesn't mean passivity or resignation, but rather a deep acknowledgement of reality, a letting go of the struggle to make things different than they are. Some things can't be changed and need to be accepted. Some suffering comes from fighting what is, rather than from what is itself. Learning to feel the emotions of acceptance, grief that honors loss, peace that embraces imperfection, serenity that accepts change, is part of emotional maturity. The heart can fight or it can accept, and knowing when to do each is wisdom. Sometimes the most profound emotional experience is simply accepting what you feel, accepting what is, accepting life as it unfolds, with all its joy and sorrow, all its beauty and pain, all its mystery and certainty, exactly as it is. And so, our quiet journey through human emotions comes to a gentle close. We've travelled far tonight, from ancient theories about the heart's wisdom to modern understandings of neural networks, touching on questions that span from the deeply personal to the universally human. The theories behind us now, like stars fading into dawn. Some theories offered answers, others only deeper questions. Some felt solid as stone, others shimmered like mirages in desert heat. But all of them carried a piece of humanity's endless curiosity about what moves inside us, our refusal to accept feelings at face value, our need to understand the heart's mysterious workings. These theories, some ancient as philosophy itself and some born in yesterday's laboratories, represent our attempts to understand perhaps the most fundamental question about being human. What are emotions, and why do we feel? Theories are strange things, aren't they? They're not quite facts, not quite fantasies. They live in the space between what we know and what we imagine, between certainty and speculation. They're humanity's way of reaching toward truth with imperfect hands, building bridges across chasms of ignorance with planks of reason and intuition. Some will be proven right, confirmed by future evidence. Others will fade, replaced by better explanations, but the reaching itself, the wondering, the endless curiosity about our inner lives, that never stops, never will stop, as long as humans feel and think and wonder why. If your eyes are already heavy, that's just fine, perfect even. Let the last traces of emotional theories fade behind your thoughts, becoming less distinct, less important, dissolving into the background like fog lifting at dawn. Let your breath carry you softly into rest, each exhale releasing a little more tension, a little more holding on, each inhale drawing you deeper into calm, into quiet, into the peaceful darkness that awaits. There's still so much more to discover about emotions, endless theories waiting, endless questions to explore, but for now, you've learned enough. You've wondered enough. You've travelled far through mysteries of the heart, and emotions can wait until morning, patient and unchanging, ready whenever you return to wonder about them again. You don't need to remember any of this. Not the names of theorists, not the details of mechanisms, not even the theories themselves. They were never meant to be memorized, only experienced, like watching clouds drift across the sky, like listening to rain on windows, like feeling wind on your face. What matters is not what you retain in memory, but how you felt while listening. The gentle stimulation of curiosity, the soft pleasure of learning, the quiet comfort of questions asked in darkness, of mysteries explored in the safety of approaching sleep. That's enough. That's everything. The theories themselves can fade, can be forgotten, can drift away into the night. What remains is the feeling of having wondered, having explored, having spent time in the company of ideas that tried to explain the inexplicable, to understand the heart's language, to make sense of what moves inside us. Notice how your body has grown heavier as we've talked, how your muscles have softened without your trying, how even the weight of your thoughts has decreased, become lighter, easier to release. This is the natural rhythm of rest, the way consciousness gradually releases its grip, letting you drift like a leaf on water, like a cloud across sky, like a thought dissolving into sleep. You don't need to force it. You don't need to try. Just allow it, the way you'd allow yourself to float in calm water, trusting the water to hold you, trusting the darkness to be safe, trusting that sleep will come when it comes, gentle and natural as nightfall. There's nothing you need to do now, no answers to chase, no puzzles to solve, no theories to understand or remember or think about. Just the calm certainty that mystery itself is a kind of lullaby, one that will carry you into sleep. The heart's mysteries, the questions about what we feel and why, the endless theories trying to explain emotions, all of it can wait. All of it can rest. So let go. Let your mind wander where it will, through dreams or darkness, through memories or nothing at all. Let your consciousness dim like a sunset, gradually, naturally, beautifully, fading from bright awareness into the soft darkness of sleep. Thank you for spending this time with me, for letting me guide you through these theories, these questions, these mysteries about human emotions. Thank you for your curiosity, for your willingness to wonder, for choosing to end your day with learning rather than emptiness, with questions rather than noise, with gentle exploration of what makes us human. It means something, this choice you've made. It says something about who you are, someone who seeks understanding even in the quiet moments before sleep, someone who values knowledge, who appreciates mystery, who finds peace in wondering. And I'm grateful to be part of your evening, part of your routine, part of the quiet ritual that carries you from waking into sleep, from consciousness into dreams. You're not alone in this. Right now, all across the world, others are listening too, drifting through these same theories, wondering these same questions about emotions and feeling and the heart's language. Some are ahead of you, already deep in dreams, they're breathing slow and steady. Others are just beginning, just settling in, just starting this journey through theories of emotion. But you're all connected by this shared experience, this common journey through mystery and wonder, this quiet exploration of what it means to feel, to be human, to have a heart that moves in response to life, a quiet community of curious minds, seeking rest and knowledge in the same breath, finding peace in questions that have no final answers, in theories that point toward truth without ever fully grasping it. Imagine yourself now floating through the theories we've explored, passing by them as if through constellations in the night sky, questions above, questions below, a galaxy of wonder all around you about emotions and their nature, and you at the quiet center, resting in the knowledge that mystery is not something to fear, but something to embrace, to welcome, to find comfort in, that not knowing is not failure, but invitation to keep wondering, keep exploring, keep being curious, that the heart keeps secrets not to frustrate us, but to keep us humble, to keep us curious, to keep us reaching toward understanding while accepting that full understanding may always remain just beyond grasp. Let that thought comfort you now. Let it wrap around you like a blanket woven from starlight and uncertainty, from questions and theories and the endless human attempt to understand what we feel, soft and strange and somehow perfect. The theories we've explored tonight are just whispers in an infinite conversation about emotions, questions asked across millennia by philosophers and scientists and poets, and ordinary people wondering why their hearts feel what they feel. Mysteries that connect us all, that make us all part of the same human family trying to understand itself, trying to make sense of joy and sorrow, love and fear, all the feelings that make us alive. There's nothing left to do now. No answers to chase, no puzzles to solve, no theories to understand or remember. Just the calm certainty that mystery itself is a kind of lullaby, one that will carry you into sleep gently, naturally, peacefully. So let go. Let your mind wander where it will, through dreams or darkness, through memories or nothing at all. Let your consciousness dim like a sunset, gradually, naturally, beautifully, fading from bright awareness into the soft darkness of sleep where dreams wait, where rest waits, where peace waits for you. And know that when you wake, the theories will still be here, the questions will still wait patiently, and the universe will still be strange and wonderful, full of mysteries about emotions and feeling and what it means to be human. But that's tomorrow's concern. Tonight is for rest, for dreams, for letting go of everything except the gentle pull of sleep, the soft embrace of darkness, the peaceful certainty that you can stop wondering now, stop thinking now, stop doing anything at all except drifting into sleep. I hope you sleep well and dream softly. May your rest be deep, your dreams be gentle, and your tomorrow be bright. Thank you for being here, for listening, for wondering with me about the beautiful mystery of human emotions. Good night,